Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. I'm coming at you not live from the Bronx. Hold on, I'm going to minimize my photo booth application so I can read my speech to you. I guess I'll start by saying I hope you're all well and healthy and hopeful. We have a rough couple of months ahead, I fear, but lots of changes coming, so keep the faith. I'm going to get right to the point. I am here to thank you. Why am I here to thank you, you may wonder. Well, I'll tell you why. It's because people like you, a lot of you, introduced me to theater. I saw my first play at the community theater in my hometown, Presque Isle, Maine. It was called the Pioneer Players. That was the organization that put it on. I have no idea why that was their name. The Pioneer Players in northern Maine. It doesn't really make sense, but that's what they called themselves, the Pioneer Players. So that's where I saw my first play. And I did my first play in high school at Presque Isle High School. Now, Presque Isle, Maine is 500 miles north of Boston. It is very far away from any professional theater. I think it's like 300 miles away from Portland Stage in Portland, Maine. So I didn't find the theater. I didn't find my way to the theater by watching professional plays. I found my way to the theater because of people like you. So my first thank you is thank you for introducing people like me to theater because that's where my career began. Like I said, community theater got it all started for me. The Pioneer Players used the University of Maine at Presque Isle's auditorium, one of two in the town. And the auditorium became the Pioneer Playhouse whenever the Pioneer Players did their plays there. And I remember that feeling that most of us are familiar with, that feeling that we all remember the first time we saw a show. I think the first thing I ever saw there was Guys and Dolls. And I just remember loving the singing and the dancing, and I remember loving the silliness and the love stories. And I remember loving seeing people I knew up there on stage acting and singing and dancing and acting crazy. And like I said, I was introduced to being in plays when I was in high school. I was really into music in high school, but then I did a play, and I realized that I liked words better than music. Music hits the ears and the heart, and it stirs the soul, but plays make things happen in your heart and your soul and in your ears and in your mind, because plays and musicals are full of ideas, and music isn't ideas, I don't think, but I think what my theater teacher in high school told us once, that the reason theater is so thrilling to people is because it uses every single art form to do what it does, and I think that's really interesting. Miss Frick, our theater teacher in high school, she was pretty awesome. She said that theater is the queen of the arts because it uses all the other art forms, like I said, to do what it does. And think about it. Theater is writing first, prose and poetry. That's how a play starts. Theater is the art of oratory, the spoken word, voice and speech. Music isn't just about all plays. You have transition music, you have some live music in a play. Maybe a play has songs. In musicals, there are songs. There's lots of music in musicals, obviously. And theater is very visual, so the visual arts factor in a big way. Painting, sculpture, architecture, projections. And then there's dance, of course. People can dance in plays, and they dance in musicals. And there's dance theater, of course. I think that's it. I don't think I'm missing anything. But anyway, the theater is kind of like a clearinghouse of all the art forms, and all those artistic elements, all those different art forms make theater a feast for the senses, and I think that's what drew me to it at first, that feast. Maybe I didn't mention like the art of costume design. I guess that's visual art. But anyway, I think it was just all those elements together are what made it so fascinating to me, and how many different arts converge to create theater. Different forms of art converge to create theater. But anyway, I remember. So I saw the first thing I ever saw was a musical at the Prescott Players, or that's what it's called now, but it was the Pioneer Players. And then the first play I ever saw was The Glass Menagerie, and a couple of my friends were in it, and I was just kind of blown away by words. I remember in high school we did our musical in the fall and then our contest play in the spring, and the first time I was in a play, that was it. I realized that I loved plays even more than musicals because of the power of the spoken word. And then when I was in college, my mind was totally blown because I did my first student-written play, and that I just had never thought about the fact that I could be in a play that no one had ever done or heard before. Anyway, all this to say, it's the non-professional theater world that got me started, and it's what gets everybody started. So I guess I just want to say thank you to all of you who are tuned in, the teachers, the professors, the community theater people, actors, directors, designers, administrators, all of you out there tuned in tonight. Thank you for all you do to get young people started in the theater so that they can become older people who make theater, like me. Okay, so that's my first big thank you to you all. Here's my second big thank you, and there are 7 of these so you can keep track. Thank you for what you do, or for what people who do what you do. Thank you for what you've done for Almost Maine. I'm a playwright. I wrote Almost Maine. It's a pretty popular play. And I wanted to tell you all tonight that people like you have helped it become a classic. And I know that sounds a little boastful, maybe, but hear me out. I'm not going to be insufferable, I promise. But I went to lunch a few years ago with some people from Dramatists Play Service, and they're the publisher of Almost Maine. And they told me over lunch that Almost Maine was becoming one of their most popular titles. And in fact, I think it was their most popular title for a while. And they wanted to celebrate that fact with me. And they told me that the reason that it was becoming what they said was a classic was because of all of you. So thank you. Did you all know that there are 150,000 English-speaking theater companies and producing organizations around the world? I think that's the number that Dramatist Play Service gave me. Isn't that amazing? And the vast majority of those theaters are high school, college, and community theater organizations, non-professional organizations, amateur organizations, if you will. I want to talk to you about that word, amateur. It's used condescendingly often. It's a term of derision, often. It implies or can imply less than. And I just want to say that I wonder why. Because I was thinking about this. Some amateurs become pros. Amateurs play in major tennis and golf tournaments sometimes and do really well. Amateurs play college sports, and they're pretty awesome. The Olympics used to be all amateurs. But when people move from amateur to professional, it doesn't really change the quality of the athlete or the artist. Like when an NCAA basketball star gets drafted in the WNBA, say, she's not suddenly better or something. And I don't know, if you get your equity card or your SAG card when you're an actor, you become a professional actor, but it doesn't mean that you're suddenly better than you were when you were an amateur. I guess what I'm saying is I just don't think there's a divide between amateur and professional. I don't think there's a divide between quality amateur sports and pro sports, between non-professional theater and professional theater. I mean, a good football game is a good football game, whether you're in high school, college, or the NFL. Good theater is good theater, and it can be good at a high school, and it can be good at a college, and it can be good at a community theater, and it can be good at Cortland Rep. It can be good at Capitol Rep, or it can be good on Broadway, off Broadway, and it can be bad in all those places too. I'm sure many of you would agree. But yeah, sure, there are amazing people on Broadway, and there are amazing professional actors. I'm not denying that. But there are gifted people everywhere. And the difference is, I think what makes you a pro or an amateur is simply money. The pro gets paid, the amateur doesn't. In the theater, there's a lot more money in the professional world, obviously. I mean, the sets on Broadway, right? I mean, come on, they're amazing. because they have big budgets. And maybe there's more know-how on Broadway and at professional theater companies, but I don't think there's more talent. I mean, maybe more concentrated talent, but one of the things this goes back to this idea of amateur. There is definitely not more heart in just because you're a professional, like in professional theater. We've all seen, breathtaking performances at high school, in high school plays, and I've seen amazing production of plays and musicals at colleges, at community theaters, with gorgeous sets and gorgeous lighting and amazing performances. I guess my point is, professional theater makers don't have a lock on great theater. I think you all know this, but I think it's important to say. Greatness is something that visits. It isn't owned. It's like genius visits people, but I don't think we should call people geniuses. I think you're visited by genius, and genius can strike at any time. I think the writer Elizabeth Gilbert said this in a TED Talk. I think that's who I'm stealing that from. But anyway, I think that genius strikes when there's passion and desire and love. And love is what brings me back to the word amateur. Let's take a look at that word. It comes from the Latin amare, or amare. I guess that's how you would say it if you were in Latin class. Amare means to love. Amateur used to be the French word for lover. True story. And amateurs do things because they love to. Not for the money, not because they have to make a living doing it, but for love. And that, to me, is a very beautiful thing. Honestly, some of the most important professional experiences I've had have been lacking love. And it's what I always see most in non-professional productions, love. You all do theater for love, not to get rich or famous, but because you love it. And things that are made with love, everybody knows this, they're better. My Nana always used to say that her cookies were the best because she put love in them for me and my cousins. So much love was in her cookies. She said that's why they were the most delicious cookies. And I guess what I'm saying is that the theater that you all make is different because it's made with so much love. I'm not saying that professional theater isn't, but I don't know. Sometimes my professional jobs have been jobs, and it's not quite the same as what you're all doing, which is making theater with love because you love it. And that's what makes it special, I think. And people like you, lovers of theater, amateur theater makers, if you will, have made Almost Maine, which is a play all about love, become a classic. And I feel like I owe you all a huge debt. So thank you for helping Almost Maine to become a classic. And it's funny because most plays don't become classics because of people like you. Most plays become a part of this theatrical canon by premiering on Broadway and winning prizes and then getting produced at great professional theaters all over the country and all over the world. But Almost Maine's journey, that wasn't Almost Maine's journey at all. In fact, Almost Maine taught me something that has helped me so much. You know that quote from Hamlet? Horatio says to Hamlet, "There are more things in heaven and earth than can be dreamt of in your philosophy." That is so apropos when I think about Almost Maine, because what happened with Almost Maine was not at all what I dreamt. I never dreamt that I would write a play that would become like a hugely popular high school play or a hugely popular play in Norway or Russia. And I think that's because my philosophy was too small. I honestly thought that it would have a wildly successful run at Portland Stage Company in Portland, Maine, which it did. And then I planned on a wildly successful off-Broadway run. And there was an off-Broadway run, but it wasn't wildly successful or even moderately successful. It ran for a couple of months, which was technically a flop. But I was still hoping and dreaming that it would become so wildly successful off Broadway that it would transfer to Broadway and win awards and run forever, and that didn't happen. Instead, it kind of tanked and got some kind of okay reviews. There were some good ones, and most were kind of okay, and some were not okay at all. But then it got published because Dramatist Play Service said that it had the potential to to do really well for them. They saw potential that I didn't even understand. They thought it would do okay at professional theaters all over the place, and it did okay. But then they said they knew that it was going to find people like you, um, and that you would find it. And so I guess I just really want to thank you with my whole heart for finding Almost Maine and for helping it become a classic, their words, not mine, and for helping me learn that there are more things in heaven and earth that can be dreamt of in your philosophy. Um, and while I'm at it, and this is thank you number 2.5, I would say, thank you so much for being able to do plays with large casts. Almost Maine can be done with a small cast, like professional theater companies usually use 4 actors for the 19 roles, and non-pro or amateur companies typically use larger casts. And this is one of the big reasons that Dramatist Play Service saw potential for Almost Maine. It's why they wanted to publish it after its inauspicious run. Almost Maine can be a large cast play. And did you know that community theater, high school theater, college theater, that's where large cast plays live now? Because you can cast them, because you are amateurs, not professional. Your actors are doing plays at your theaters, not for the money, but for love. So again, you don't have to pay your actors, so it doesn't cost you to do big plays. It doesn't cost you to have huge casts in the same way that it costs professional theaters. Now, I know that a lot of high schools have done Almost Maine simply because it's a contemporary play that allows for a large cast. And that's rare, I guess. Most new plays, I mean, think about it. I guess it's not, I guess, everybody knows this. Most new plays have casts that are like 6 or less. Most of the plays being produced in New York are small cast. So I guess this little thank you is to the high school, college, community theater makers of the world. Thank you for giving life to plays with large casts. And that leads me to thank you number 3. Thank you all for keeping classic plays alive. Did you know that classic plays with big casts have been kept alive by people like you, high school theater makers, college and university theater makers, community theater makers, because the professional theaters can't afford to do them anymore. The casts are too big, so the professional companies rarely do them. So most people experience these plays like The Crucible, Our Town, 12 Angry Men or 12 Angry Jurors, You Can't Take It With You, Arsenic and Old Lace, Angels in America Now. Most people experience those plays in colleges and high schools and community theater productions. So thank you for doing them and for introducing classic plays to people all over this state. Okay, I'm on to thank you number 4, so we're moving pretty fast here. I want to thank you all, and this is a little weird, but I want to thank you all for helping me believe in Almost Maine. And for helping me believe that stories about rural people are worth telling in the theater. Like I said, Almost Maine wasn't super well received when it premiered off-Broadway in 2006. It was dismissed by a lot of critics and by a lot of theater people, and I was sad that a lot of people just didn't get it. And again, thank you to the Dramatist Play Service people, because they helped me understand why. They told me that I had written a rural story and that nobody was writing plays set in rural places anymore. Theater is an urban art form. You need butts and seats in order to survive if you're running a professional theater. And most of the butts are in densely populated urban areas. So the vast majority of professional theater companies are in theaters. So the vast majority of plays are written with those urban audiences in mind. But there are tons of non-urban, non-professional producing organizations, schools, colleges, community theaters, and the people at Dramatist Play Service told me that I had filled a void. I was putting rural people on stage, and rural people are nowhere on American stages lately. Time was that the theater idealized and revered even small town and rural America. Think of Our Town, Picnic, Most Happy Fella, The Music Man, Oklahoma, The Little Foxes, 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. I think my community theater in Presque Isle did that recently. That's why that came to mind. Annie, Get Your Gun. That's just to name a few. But the contemporary theater doesn't really care much about the West or rural America or working people in that way. I mean, Broadway will produce a play about rural people from Ireland, like The Ferryman, which is about a farming family, but I venture to guess that you will not see an American farm family on a Broadway stage for a good long while. Um, and I think, unfortunately, it comes down to prejudice, actually. um, I don't think urban elites, and I'm one of those now, so I feel like I can call my fellow urban elites out on this. I don't think urban elites care too much about rural America. I also don't think they care too much for rural America. I've noticed in my lifetime that rural people have been absent from the cultural and artistic landscape. When I moved to New York City in the late 1990s, I saw and participated in many readings and workshops and productions of new plays, and I was struck by how many of the stories those plays were telling were city stories, stories about cosmopolitan ideas and ideals, and stories about wealthy, famous, worldly, powerful, well-educated people who lived and worked in the closed quarters of the concrete and steel canyons of cities. And this was all thrilling to me for a while because the city and its stories and the stories of people who live in cities were new to me. But then I started to realize, where are rural stories? Where are the stories of people I grew up with in northern Maine? People who farm and work in the forest and work in lumber mills. What about people who work and live in wide open spaces? Those people don't really populate contemporary plays. So I started writing plays about those people because I think their perspective is important, and because I think a person from a place where the sky is big, like northern Maine, it's a lot of potato fields, just flat, wide open space. I think when you grow up in a place like that, you're going to have a really different perspective, literally, than a person who is from a place where the sky is small, like New York City. And, I feel like I shouldn't say that rural people are nowhere to be found, but when rural people are depicted in theater and TV and film, they're pretty one-dimensional. Like, they voted for a certain person for president, or they're on meth, or they're addicted to opioids, or they're not well educated, or they're fat, or they're poor, or they're nasty. And while rural people are and do and did a lot of those things, that isn't all they are. They also have joy in their lives and are seeking connection and love, just like everybody else. And those are the stories that Almost Maine tells, stories about hardworking people, some of whom are pretty down and out, but they're not hopeless. They're not deplorables. So I guess I just want to thank all of you amateur theater makers for finding my play and for helping me believe in it and in the stories, the rural stories that I tell. By doing that play, you're giving dimension to people who aren't given much dimension in the stories we tell on TV and movies and in plays these days. Okay, here's thank you number 5. I want to just say thank you, community theater, college theater, high school theater, for teaching people. Theater makes people learn. That's one of the things I love about it the most. I am most moved at plays that touch me in my heart and my guts, but also have an impact up here. When I learn something new or encounter a new idea, I just get so excited. Do you know who Ben Hecht is? He was the playwright who wrote The Front Page, which became the movie His Girl Friday. He said that too much cerebration is not a desirable quality for a theater person to have. Again, too much cerebration is not a desirable quality for a theater person to have. He said, well, let me finish what he said. He said, a good theater artist records the burn of experiences in the heart. And I say yes. I mean, I know that we lead with our hearts and our souls, I think, as theater people, but I think I disagree because too much cerebration might not be good for a good thing for a theater artist to have. But a good dose of cerebration is absolutely necessary, because in order to be a theater artist, not only do you have to learn your craft as a performer, as a designer, as a director, as a stage manager, to run a theater. You have to learn, when you're doing a play or a musical, you have to learn about the story that you're telling. Like if you're doing The Crucible, to do that play, you need to know a little something about McCarthyism and Puritanism, right? To do Inherit the Wind, Scope's Monkey Trial, you can't help but learn about one of the fundamental arguments that makes this country what it is: science versus religion, creationism versus evolution. If you did Les Mis, you might want to know a little bit about the French Revolution. If you do 12 Angry Jurors, you have to think about reason and law and reasonable doubt and prejudice and morals and values. If you do Our Town, what is this life anyway? And what's next? And why are we here? If you do 1776, you need to know a little bit about the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Anyway, you get the point. Theater introduces people to new worlds. It's super educational. And I feel like a lot of people don't get that, especially in high schools. I feel like, it's all sports in school sometimes. And I feel like people just don't get that theater is like interdisciplinary education before interdisciplinary education was cool. One of my proudest moments as a theater artist, it's an Almost Maine moment. It came in 2004 when Almost Maine premiered at Portland Stage Company. I was at a talk back, and a woman stood up, and her question or her comment, it was actually a comment. She said, "I want to thank you for the story about the two men who fall in love." There's a story in Almost Maine about a couple of guys. One works at a mill and one works in construction, and they're commiserating over bad dates that they've had and keep having, and they literally fall in love with one another. And this woman said to me, "That scene helped me understand that my son fell in love, just like I did. And it just helped me wrap my head around that, and I want to thank you." That meant so much to me, because in 2004, that scene was a little bit, it was a little tricky for Maine. But because Almost Maine is a romantic comedy, it's kind of harmless. It seems harmless. And it doesn't seem like it's going to teach people much. But I'm proud of the fact that it has helped some people understand that gay people fall in love too. And it's made people deal with the presence of queerness in rural places. And to see people who have a hard time with queerness or are confused by it or scared of it, or homophobic, to see people empathize and consider something that was difficult for them to consider. I guess that's what we do is all about, getting people to see another's perspective and empathizing. So thanks for encouraging empathy, because that's what theater does. We could sure use as much of this stuff as we can get right now. But anyway, that's another speech. Okay, so I'm up to thank you number 6. Thank you all for making local art. I like to call it arting local, like ARTING, arting local. Thank you for arting local. There's a big local movement going on right now. Buy local, shop local, hire local, eat local. You all art local. And I think that is so important. And I just thank you for doing it. And I need to tell you, remind people that you do it. Remind people that you make locally made art. Encourage people to think about coming to your high school plays, your college plays, your community theater productions, because they're supporting local artists. We support local athletes at schools. Let's support local actors. I feel like we support local musicians even more than we support local theater companies. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe your theater company is just like, you have no problem with getting people to go. But I know in my hometown, it was a little tricky. It was hard to get people to think that, we weren't just a bunch of weirdos and losers, which we probably were. But, we made good theater in my little town. But back to my idea about local arting local. And this isn't a thank you, it's a request. I think this is important. I think I would like to ask you all to maybe consider, if you're not doing it already, really give some thought to figuring out if you can tell local stories on your stages. Put the stories of your community on stage, the history of your town, and maybe raise awareness about issues that affect you and the people in your communities by putting those stories on stage. You know, there are fascinating people doing fascinating things in podunk places like where I grew up in northern Maine. And I say, why not find out about those interesting people and the interesting things that they do, and make plays about them? I think it would thrill your audiences to see themselves and people they know and events they've heard about and issues they care about being discussed and presented on stage, on your stage. One of the contest plays that we did when I was in high school was written by one of my high school theater teachers. We had four of them actually. Like there was a set guy and two assistants and and Miss Frick. But anyway, Glenna Smith, she just passed away actually. She was 100 years old and she was just an awesome person and such a great influence on me. But anyway, she wrote about her years growing up in rural Maine, and the play that she wrote was it was about domestic violence and sexual assault. And, you know, high school kids were doing this play, and it really hit home. People loved it, but because the play wasn't about people from another place, it was a play about people that Mrs. Smith grew up with, and in a time not too far gone by when we did it. And I think it made people feel important, seen. I think a lot of people didn't know there was an option to make plays about the people who they knew, people who lived where they lived. But it helped me realize that the people I grew up with were worth getting to know, and that they had fascinating stories to tell. And I think it helped me realize that it was worth following my heart, and my heart always wanted to write about where I was from. Actually, there's a writer from Maine named Kathy Pelletier, and she says you always writers basically write the first 20 years of their lives over and over. And I do that by writing about the place I grew up. Anyway, so thank you for arting local. And I just want to encourage you all to think about maybe, you know, creating new theater about where you're from. Okay, I'm almost done here. So this is number 7. This is the longest thank you, so hang tight. And this one goes back to love. The idea of love, amateur. But you know, hold on, wait. Before I talk about thank you number 7, I just want to take a second to allow us all to get really excited for a second. I want you to take a second right now and think about what it's going to be like when we can make plays again and go to plays again. I mean, I am so sick of screens and you're watching me through a screen and I'm talking to you through a screen, and I mean Zoom and Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu. I am sick of getting my stories through screens, my phone, my computer, my TV. I want to hear people sing live. I want to hear people play music live. I want to hear people tell me stories live. I mean, that's what makes what we do so special. And I want us right now, let's just think about what that means, live. I ask kids this all the time when I teach. I teach quite a bit. I've been dropping in on classes throughout the pandemic just because theater teachers can't do much right now. So I'm trying to just drop in and talk to like the places that had to cancel Almost Maine when the pandemic started, or have to do a Zoom production of Almost Maine. Anyway, I ask kids all the time, what makes theater special? And it's funny that they always answer like, it's live, it's emotional, it's more visceral. And that's all true, but they can never get specific and say why it's more visceral and why it's more emotional. What about the live experience is so special? And I want to talk to you about why I think it's so special, just because it's fun to think about and it's fun to dream on because we haven't been able to make theater for a while. I think what makes theater so special is, this is so basic, but when you're at a play, it is happening right there in front of you. So it's really happening, even though it isn't really happening because it's a made-up story or an interpretation of something that actually happened. But what is happening right in front of you, and there's something dangerous about that. And this is something that I think we all forget, and this is what the live experience is all about. And the kids never get to this, but when I tell them, they're like, oh yeah, right. When you watch a play, all 5 of your senses can be engaged. You can smell a play. I love telling kids that. You can smell a play. If someone makes coffee in a play, or bakes bread in a play, or makes bacon and eggs, and you're not in a giant, giant theater, you can smell it. I also love to tell kids, oh, it makes me think of the David Cromer's Our Town at the end of his production. The final scene when Emily goes back to see her family. They're eating a real breakfast and they had a real set, like everything was real for the first time in the play. So the bacon and eggs were being made. They were in like a fully appointed and functioning old kitchen. It was just really beautiful. Anyway, sorry, I digress. But so you can smell theater, you can touch theater. I love to tell kids that you could go up and touch people in a play if you want to. You can go up and touch people in a play if you want to. You could do that. People probably wouldn't appreciate it, but you could do that. There's something dangerous about that. If someone doesn't like what they're seeing in a play, they could go up and interrupt it. They could walk right up on stage and shut it down if they wanted to. Sometimes people leave, and actors know when people leave the theater. They know if it's because you're having a coughing fit. They know if it's because you're angry about the content. People can tell. We can tell. When people like swear on screen, I think it's so funny how we just don't really mind. We don't pay much attention. But boy, when people swear on stage, that is completely different. I mean, can't really swear on a high school stage, can you? But kids watch TV shows and movies with tons of swearing. I find that fascinating. Also, when people kiss on screen, we just kind of watch it. But when people kiss on stage, people gasp and they chuckle and they make funny sounds, especially high school kids. Why? Because it's actually happening right then and there. Or when a couple of guys fall in love with each other. No problem in a book, on a TV show, but in a play, not okay for a lot of school administrations and school boards. And I think it's because, when two guys fall in love, like in Almost Maine, it's because it's really happening right there, no barrier. And I think that's what makes it so powerful. And think about how hard people laugh at funny plays. Comedies are so much fun to watch because people laugh harder together at plays than they do in TV and movies. People laugh harder at live events because of that communal experience. When somebody laughs, it makes you laugh. And then think about all those gasping sounds that we only get to hear in the theater. Like when someone does somebody wrong or says something horrible about someone, or you find out like something as huge is revealed. I just love that gasping sound. And also the crying. I saw the Waverly Gallery a couple of years ago on Broadway, and I heard so much sniffling and crying. And again, I think what makes that happen is the lack of a barrier and the communal nature of it. When I started hearing all those sniffles in the Waverly Gallery, I started crying. Same with laughter. When I hear people laugh, I laugh. It's the togetherness that causes this, and that's what plays do that TV and movies can't do. They tell stories right then, right there, to a group of people who came to hear and see a story. Plays and musicals bring people together to learn and think and feel together. People come together to watch something that is really happening right in front of our eyes. And that something is usually make-believe. It's fake, it's made up, but the make-believe stories we tell somehow illuminate the reality, and the fake somehow helps us understand what's real in our lives and tells us more about what's true and what's not true, about what's going on in our world than anything else. And I think that's why we do what we do. We want to get to the truth. And I just think it's so funny that we do get to the truth by telling made-up stories. And I think we make stuff up to create the world as we want it to be. A lot, that's what Almost Maine is. It's like a love letter to Northern Maine. Northern Maine isn't a perfect place, but I think I want Northern Maine to be like it is in Almost Maine. I think plays show us what we don't want the world to be, or what we want the world to be, or remind us that we can be better. Because I think that's something all humans want. They want the world to be better. And I think that's a driving force behind what we do as theater makers. And I think one of the big ways that we make the world a better place is I think we promote unity. So I guess my final thank you is thank you for being a place where people can come together and think and learn and empathize. And thank you for investing in an art form that reminds us that we're all human beings searching for love and connection, especially right now. I mean, every day on the news, we hear about the urban-rural divide, the red state, blue state divide. We're told that we don't get along, that we're all so different, and we're all way more alike than we want to admit. And I think stories remind us of that, especially communally shared stories remind us of that, like plays, like musicals, like the stories we tell in the theater. Stories remind us, when we watch them together, they remind us of the common ground we share, and we need to be reminded that there's a lot more common ground right now than uncommon ground. There's so much anger out there right now, anger is just poisonous, but I think the stories that we love to tell can be the antidote to that poison, and that's what we do, is tell stories that are antidotes. So thanks for making the antidote. So I'm going to close here by telling you all that I was an amateur when I started writing the scenes and the sketches that would become Almost Maine. I moved to New York City in the late 90s, and my friends and I, we were all character actors, which is a nice way to say that we weren't hot. Character actors, you know, help the hot guy or the hot girl get the guy or get the girl or get the job or get the money or whatever the hot person wants. And the little sketches I was writing at the time that we would all do, kind of like as part of a variety show, they all featured characters who weren't hot or who were Hollywood hot. They're just ordinary working people, and they were the main characters of these little plays that I was writing. They weren't sidekicks. They were the lead roles. They weren't helping some really beautiful person get what they wanted. They were the people getting the love. And, you know, we were fat, we were skinny, we were ugly, we were pretty, we were black, brown, beige, white, pink, abled, differently abled. And as I look back, I realized that I wrote Almost Maine and its slightly darker cousin Lovesick because I have been, and maybe always will be, obsessed with love. I remember when I was in high school, my brother and my friends, they were all falling in love with girls, and they all had girlfriends, and I wasn't falling in love with girls, and I wanted to, but I couldn't figure out why I wasn't falling in love with girls. And then I figured some stuff out and realized that I didn't like girls. That was not till later. But I think Almost Maine for me was an exploration of love, like all the different kinds of love, because I'm fascinated by how people find their way to love, because I had such trouble finding my way to love or allowing myself to find my way to it. So maybe Almost Maine is a big therapy session for me. Maybe Lovesick is a bigger one, because I wrote that one because I wish someone had told me that being gay was the easy part. Being with someone, being married, that's the hard part. Anyway, one of the guiding quotes that just I refer to all the time when I was writing Almost Maine is this. And Carlos Santana said this. You know, Santana, the band, you know, like Oye Como Va and Smooth. Santana, Carlos Santana, the guitarist, said, "There's nothing more powerful than innocence. If you get stale or bored, remember what it was like the first time you held hands with someone who changed your molecular structure. You get the willies." I never really allowed myself to get the willies when I was younger because I was too scared to admit that boys gave me the willies. But I think I've been obsessed ever since with the willies because I wanted to get them so bad. Hence Almost Maine. Almost Maine is full of the willies. And I think my wanting to get the willies is why I write plays and why I act. I think it's why people make art, especially theater. And I'm going to tell you a story right now. It's about the willies. And it was the inspiration for the first play that I ever wrote. It's in Almost Maine. It's the scene called This Hurts. It's the one with the ironing board about the guy who can't feel pain. And that scene is based on a grim fairy tale called The Tale of the Boy Who Went Forth in the World in Search of Fear. Now, there are several versions, but here's my retelling. There once was a boy who was not afraid. His father thought that this was because he had no sense, and he wanted his son to be sensible, so he sent him into a deep, dark forest to learn what fear was. In the forest, the boy met a nasty, scary giant who never let anyone pass. And the boy asked the giant, "Hey, want to be friends?" And the giant said, "Gee, nobody's ever asked me that before. Unless usually they just scream and run away. And all I've ever wanted was a friend, so sure." And he let the boy pass. And then the boy came up to a big ravine that nobody had ever crossed because a dragon lived down in the depths of it. And the boy said to the dragon, "Hey, how you doing? Could you tell me how I can get across this ravine?" And the dragon said, "Well, no one's ever bothered to ask me for help before. Usually they just scream and run away. But sure, here, let me help you." And the dragon fire breathed down a bunch of trees, and they fell over, and they made a bridge spanning the ravine, which the boy crossed. And on the other side of the ravine was a haunted kingdom. Well, it just so happened that the king of this kingdom had made a pronouncement that any young man who could exorcise the demons from his kingdom would get his daughter's hand in marriage. It's a grim fairy tale, so it's always a guy getting a girl's hand in marriage. But if you just tell the girls out there, if you flip it, it's still a very good story. Put the girl on the quest and make her go to the kingdom and get a boy. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. Anyway, so the king had made a pronouncement that any young man who could exorcise the demons from his kingdom would get his daughter's hand in marriage, and he would get riches unimaginable. Well, the boy befriended all the ghosts and ghouls and demons that had been haunting the kingdom. They actually play cards together in the story. Pretty awesome. And he tells them all that he would really appreciate it if they would not bother the king and his kingdom anymore. And because if they did, he'd be able to get the daughter's hand in marriage. And they're all like, "Wow, cool, she's hot. So yeah, we'll go. We'll let you go for it. We'll let you go for it." And the boy was very appreciative. And so the boy, and he was now a young man, he had saved the castle and the kingdom from all the demons and the ghouls and the ghosts, and he was famous and beloved and rich. And the king pronounced that this young man would now get to marry his daughter. And the young man and his bride had a beautiful wedding, and the young man was very happy. But he wasn't satisfied. He had gotten everything most people want in this world: respect, fame, money, a spouse. But he hadn't learned what fear was. And his new bride, on their wedding night, she knew that something was wrong. "What is it?" she asked on their first night together as husband and wife. And the young man said, "All I ever wanted in this world was to learn what fear is. I want to know what it is to shiver and shake." And with that, his new wife kissed him. And the young man shivered and shook all over and said, "Ooh." And he knew what it was to shiver and shake. And he knew what fear was. The end. That's a pretty good story, huh? In one version, the wife throws red guppies all over her new husband, which has the same effect. It's basically all about the willies. I guess this is actually my last thank you. Thank you for wanting to make people shiver and shake, for wanting to give people the willies, for wanting people to feel scared and uncomfortable, and for wanting people to feel love. Most of the stories that we tell in the theater are about some kind of love. We love love, I think, we theater folk. I do. I love it. I love stories about love. I think we all do. I think we love harder and better than most people because we welcome the other. We make room for the other. We're interested in the other. I think it's what makes us all a little wacky and wonderful. We love so hard. And Mozart is given credit for saying that neither a lofty degree of intelligence nor imagination nor both together go to the making of genius. Love, love, love. That is the soul of genius. And since you're all amateurs and you make theater because you love it, and amateur once meant lover, then you all must be geniuses. I hope you remain so. We're going to need a lot of geniuses to get us through these crazy times we're in. Thank you so much for having me, and I sincerely thank you all for all you've done for me. Okay, so that's my speech. I'm going to drink some water right now. Hold on. And now I'm going to answer some questions. These came in on Wednesday night, so pretend that these are coming in right now and this is happening live. Okay, the first question. I haven't looked at these, so I'm going to answer these like off the cuff. Okay, first question. As an accomplished director, I don't know if I'm an accomplished director, but that's okay. As an accomplished director, actor, and playwright, from what do you draw your inspiration and strength? Especially in this, our current climate, where hope and despair, belief and self-doubt, determination and the desire to just surrender all fluctuate on almost a daily basis. In short, what keeps you going creatively? This is so lame, but love. I'm just interested in love stories. I wrote a new short scene for Lovesick for young people. It explores like kind of an intersex love story, which I haven't explored yet. I have a new play that I'm working on that is a love story between two young women, because there's tons of literature for gay men, theatrical literature for gay men. There's not much for women. And I have a friend, a gay woman, who's helping me because I felt like I wasn't qualified to write a story about two women, but I told her this idea that I had. She said, "You're totally qualified to write a love story. I will help you with the woman part." So I think it's love. And I just, honestly, it's that quote by Santana. I look for things that give me the willies. When something gives me the willies, I just take a look at it and examine it and try to figure out how to make myself feel like that. Does that make sense as I create? I hope that's a good answer. It's love. I sound so goofy, but that's the answer. Okay. Once actors are allowed to get back to rehearsal in person, how long do you think it will take for theaters, especially Broadway, to reopen? Well, I was in Caroline or Change. We were supposed to open on April 7th. Our first preview was supposed to be March 13th, and on March 12th, right before our final dress rehearsal, we got sent home because of the coronavirus. So that wasn't awesome, but we just got word that we're supposed to start rehearsals in September, and we're supposed to start previews on September 17th. I think I'm allowed to say that. I hope I am. I think that's out there for consumption. So that's the story. I think some Broadway shows might even open a little bit earlier, the ones that were already running. Everybody's going to have to go back into rehearsal because we're going to have to remember what we were doing. But I think late summer, early fall. Here's a question about my background. What is your background in theater? Were you a theater major in college? Did you do theater in high school? Did you have any community theater experience prior to being a professional? Well, I think I answered a lot of that in my speech. I was not a theater major. I majored in history. But I had a friend, Wendy Stetson, who's a Broadway actress, and I kind of was her groupie, so I went to all the plays that she did. And because she was brave enough to go for it, I kind of followed her lead and went for it myself. Yeah, but I did plays in high school, did some community theater for sure. Not until I was in college, so my summers, I'd go to school and come home for the summer to work or whatever, and I would do like a play at the community theater. Yeah, but I think I answered that in my speech. Okay, next question. Something Rotten was such a raucous and hilariously funny musical. Were there any sections that came out of the actors' own improvisations because of their individual senses of humor? Yeah, all the time. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but like when my brother told me to go to sleep at the beginning of the play, he said, "Now get some sleep," and I just fell onto my bed. It was kind of funny. I just did that in rehearsal one day, and they kept it. So Christian Borle was always coming up with stuff. I can't remember any examples now, but it was a challenge to not laugh when I was out on stage with him. Yeah, sure, all the time. I think, we stuck to the script pretty close, but then there were pockets and places where we could let loose a little bit. And yeah, I think people were pretty cool with that because we were a good group and we were committed to telling the story, not committed to just being funny. So I think that's what made that okay. I hope that's a good answer. What was the worst thing that has ever happened to you on stage that you had to cover for or adjust for? The worst thing I've ever experienced was during Something Rotten when our set, at the beginning of the play, our house, so like you have the big opening number and then the next event is our house appears on stage, I think. And the house got stuck on its track, so it didn't go on stage. I was like, I froze. But Brian Darcy James just like covered brilliantly for it. I don't even remember what he did. All I know is that I was just frozen looking at him like, I don't know what to do. I was supposed to be eating my soup. That's why I'm doing this. But I was eating my soup just staring at my brother wondering, what do we do? And he was awesome. And then we just, rolled back off so they could fix it. And they fixed it. And then the show went on. I think that's the worst thing that happened. I also forgot my lines once in a play. That was really awful. I went up so hard and I didn't even cover. So I think I'm not good at covering when things don't go very well. Oh no, you know what? Okay, the worst thing, this isn't the worst thing, it actually turned into the best thing. I did The Mystery of Irma Vep once, and I played Jane the housekeeper, and then the dude, the guy, I can't remember his name. Lord Hillcrest, I think that was his name, right? And one time I changed out of Lord, because it's a lot of quick changes in that show, and I changed from Lord Hillcrest into Jane, and I forgot to take off my mustache. I laughed quite a bit. So did my scene partner. But it was Jeff Bender was his name. But anyway, yes, I don't think we covered very well with that one. Everybody was laughing so hard because I was dressed as a maid, a woman with a mustache. It was very funny. Okay. Are you working on any new plays? Yes, I told you about them. Would you consider writing the book to a musical? I think Almost Main's going to be a musical, but I can't really talk about it yet. Tell us anything about your Fiddler on the Roof experience. Working with Alfred Molina was a highlight of my life. Working with Randy Graff was a highlight of my life. Working with Sally Murphy was a highlight of my life, my career. Wonderful actors, David LeBeau, wonderful director, wonderful take on the show. I think they introduced the idea that Tevye is an everyman, Alfred Molina and the creative team. He was the first person who did it as who did Tevye as an everyman, not as like a scene-stealing, larger-than-life, caricature, I guess you would say. I also got to fly in Fiddler on the Roof. I got to drop from the ceiling at 8 feet per second. It was really, really cool and exciting. But yeah, it was my debut, so it was all exciting. It was so, so exciting. And to the young people out there, I didn't make my Broadway debut till I was like 34 years old. So just know that it took me some time. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. What playwrights do you admire and or have you been influenced by? Shakespeare, because of the magical realism stuff. I would say The Winter's Tale is probably my favorite play, Shakespeare play. Shakespeare is a huge influence on me. That's my biggest influence, I would say. And then, of course, Edward Albee, because of his absolutely incisive, warped understanding of relationships and marriage. I loved August Osage County so much. I didn't know a play could thrill people the way that play thrilled people. Those are my answers for now. Oh, my favorite play might be Raisin in the Sun. So because it's just about hope and dreaming. And I remember reading it in high school and just loving it so much. And then watching the movie and loving that so much. So that was a big influence too. And also The Little Foxes is a big influence too. Just how stuck those women are and how mean those women could be. There's just such a great example of just phenomenally well-written women. Anyway, what inspired you to write Almost Maine? Well, my hometown is called Presque Isle, Maine. In French, Presqu'île, which means almost island. Not because it's on the ocean, but because there's a river that makes it almost an island. But so Presqu'île means almost island, almost Maine. That's where that came from. Also because it's almost in Canada, almost not in the United States. And all the love stories are almost happy. Yeah, I guess I think I talked about this growing up in northern Maine. I was obsessed with love. That's kind of what did it. And I also love O. Henry short stories and twists in my stories, and I love romantic comedies that are good. I actually think most romantic comedies are sentimental comedies. Sentimental people think everything's going to work out fine. Romantic people think everything's going to go to hell. I think I'm a romantic because I'm afraid that things are going to not work out. I think most people are romantic, so I think romantic comedies are what I'm interested in, where you're just not sure things are going to work out. Yes, I modeled it a little bit after the town I grew up in, but mostly after a town called Portage Lake, which is a little bit further west and towards the woods. Were the characters based on real people or experiences you've had? Well, my search for love is all in there. My examination of all the different ways people love each other and don't love each other is in there, or many of the different ways people do that. And yeah, the characters are all based on composites of people I knew and me. They're all me. Another question. The dialogue in Almost Maine is very specific. You have notes on the way the lines should overlap, which gives it a very natural sound. This was interesting from a director's point of view, and I thought very helpful from the actor's point of view. Do you think that your experience on stage influenced your decision to write it that way? Oh, absolutely. I want to help people get to what I'm going for as fast as I can. So there are way too many stage directions in that play probably, but I just wanted to help people know this is what I'm thinking. You don't have to do it, but this is what I'm thinking. And I wanted people to really, I want the play to feel like normal people are talking, and then all of a sudden something really abnormal happens and the play becomes incredibly theatrical, but not because it's like overt or obvious. I want it to feel like normal everyday speech and occurrences, and then it blows up into something much larger than normal and everyday. And I wanted the dialogue to sound like people really talking. That thrills me. When I feel like people are really talking and not doing a play, that thrills me. So yeah, all my notes and my unusual punctuation is to help people sound like they're really talking and really not listening to each other, because that's what I think plays are all about, is when people are hearing each other and when they're not hearing each other. I think that's all I have to say on that. Next question. You're an actor and a playwright. Have you directed before, and or do you aspire to it? I have. I've directed Almost Maine once. I've directed Lovesick once. I think I'm a better acting coach than a director. I don't see the big picture. I'm kind of like a detail guy, so I don't think I'm an awesome director. I don't quite understand how to direct. Like I'm afraid I would be I have to work really hard not to tell people how I would do it, which is not awesome. So that doesn't make me a director. That makes me a good coach. I'm good at working with actors, I think, that way. Because I've worked with my friends on auditions my whole career, you know, so. Yeah, I don't know if I aspire to being a director. I don't know yet. I mean, maybe a film director, because I feel like you have more control that way, but not maybe a theatrical director. I don't think. That's my answer right now. Do you prefer acting to writing or vice versa? I don't really prefer anything. I just like to make theater. Whatever I'm doing to make theater makes me happy. Whether it's writing plays, acting in plays. Yeah, that's my answer. How have you stayed creative during the pandemic? Have you been able to work creatively? I've done okay. I have a lot of, I'm lucky. I think this pandemic's been a lot easier for older people than for younger people, because when you're my age, you've basically built a life. So the pandemic's given me a chance to renovate. That's kind of what I tell people. And I have a lot of journals full of ideas, and I've basically gotten to go through and kind of pick the next couple stories I want to work on. And one of them is the story about the two young women I told you about. And I guess, yeah, that's what I've been doing. That's what I've been working on. I mean, I have been, and I'm trying not to work on too many things so I don't get overwhelmed, but definitely. And also, I'm going to work on playing more music, because I used to play more music, and that's something I think I'm going to do with the next big chunk of time we have, because we've got it looks like another lockdown coming. So let's see, I have a question. It says, oops, hold on. NBC recently aired a retrospective on the Law and Order franchise. Several current and past actors, both principal and guest stars, talked about their experiences working on the series. Can you tell us about your own experience? I think my Law and Order job was my favorite job I've ever had. I got to be on the show for about 5 years, from 2002 to 2007. Um, I did about 30 episodes. It was so much fun. It was just the coolest part about it is it was such a well-oiled machine by the time I joined the cast, like that it I would go in really early in the morning, usually like 5:30 or 6. I would get ready. I didn't have to wear makeup because I didn't have to be hot, because I'm not. So there you go. And most of my scenes took place in a lab. Sometimes I had to do courtroom scenes, so that would make for long days. But if I just had a scene in the lab, they would come in, ask me some questions. Jerry Orbach and Jesse Martin would come in and ask me some questions. I would answer them with a bunch of, super scientific jargon. And I was usually, if we got it right in a couple takes, they'd send me home. So sometimes I'd be down there at 5:36 and I'd be home by 10. It was pretty crazy. So it was kind of fun to it was just it was so fun. To get to have such an easy job in a way. And also just getting to work with like Jerry Orbach and Jesse L. Martin, they're both Broadway guys. And when they found out that I was a Broadway guy, I was doing Fiddler on the Roof, and Jesse L. Martin actually read my name when I got nominated for a Tony, which was just so cool, and he and Jerry were just really excited about, the Tony nomination, and they cared and they knew about it. It meant a lot. It was a great, great experience. It was hard though because I had to learn a lot of technical jargon, and they would often change the script a lot. And it was a lot of walking and talking, which was sometimes a little hilarious. One time I had to walk and talk with a heavy, heavy microscope, and I kept dropping it. It was not awesome. What did you learn on the set of Law and Order that has helped you in your career? I guess just how the only way you can have fun and freedom is if you know your lines backwards and forwards. I mean, that's the battle, is learning the material as well as you possibly can. And I also just learned my way around a camera, That was my real